So we've started talking about typography, but typography can also be its own art form. And in this project, you're going to make a typography illustration using a profile of an object and combining it with a quote. You'll make a simple silhouette and you use text worked into the object to make an illustration. Now this was all done in Illustrator, and you're going to be continuing to enhance your skills in this application. So this is the final project, and this is again my exemplar. But what you're going to do is, first off, you're going to open up your Typography Illustration file, right? And that's in your Typography Illustration folder. So in this folder, you'll see you have a grunge background, Typography Illustration doc, and your name Typography Illustration. You're going to download the grunge background and your name Typography Illustration. You're going to pop it into your desktop folder. You're going to make an old folder for it. You're going to rename, instead of your name Typography Illustration, you're going to actually do your name. So I'm going to do Miss G Typography Illustration, right? And you make sure you have the grunge background around, again, because you will need that. And you're going to start by looking at this doc. So you're going to start with coming up with ideas for your quotes, and they can be quotes for anything. Remember, you don't want them very short, but you also don't want them incredibly long. So come up with a couple different ideas of different quotes. After you come up with a couple different ideas, you'll then pick one you think is the best, and you'll come up with ideas for what images you want. Now, you'll notice that I did a car, and I have a quote here from The Fast and the Furious. Because I really like that movie and I thought this would be a cool image. Again, this can be whatever you so desire. Just remember, you're going to be making a simple silhouette using the pen tool of your object. So think about what you can have that will look good as a silhouette. It's nice to have little cutout points. It could be faces, it can be buildings, it could be really anything you want, because your quote will be worked into that to make it into an illustration. All right, so you figured out what you want. You've thought of some images, and then you've looked, and you're like, this is the image I want. So then what you're going to do is right-click and save image as. And then you save it to wherever you need to save it, right? Typography Illustration, I've already saved it. I saved it as car, right? And then you have your source image here as well. The next step you're going to take is you're going to look at some of these fonts, free fonts that you could possibly download. So you're going to be looking at some of the different options of fonts that you can use in your project. So don't just rely on the fonts that you have on your computer. Look at some of the sources, the different websites that I've given to you that have some free fonts. So Font Squirrel is one example. There's a couple other in the project information that you can also look at. So you're going to actually find a handwritten font, because this is kind of mimicking a hand-created illustration, but done in Illustrator. So you're going to want to look for something that matches your quote, that matches the feeling, and you're going to want something that's a little bit more hand done, maybe a little more messy. You can look under grunge, you look under handwritten, you can pick whatever you want. You download the file, and then you just double click it on it to actually add it. So you can hear, this is Elliot 6, I downloaded it. You just double click on it, it'll open up in the font book, and then you click install font, and I've already done that. So I very highly encourage you to actually download fonts for this project. Don't just rely on the ones that are on your computer. So I found my font, I have my image, I actually have my quote. I've downloaded both the grunge background Illustrator file and also my Typography Illustration file, and I've renamed it. So now I'm going to open it up in Illustrator. So now how do we get from this blank document all the way to the final document, which you can see right here? How do we do that? So the first step you're going to be doing is you're going to import your source image. You're going to be using this as a reference image, all right? So you're going to go File, Place, and you're going to select that source image, and mine is the car, and I'm going to place it. Now, you're going to want it to be about the size of your artboard, Remember, hold down Shift to keep it proportional. You don't really have to worry about this. Isn't actually going to be a part of your final project, but we're using it as a source image. What I recommend you do is you click on your image, you'll see under appearance, and you want to make your opacity probably more about 50% so that you can actually see what you're doing. Then you're going to lock this layer so that you're not moving it around, and you're going to make a new layer that you're going to start doing your illustration on. So we've locked our object to prevent this reference image from being selected. You can see it's locked, unlock, locked. All right. Then you're going to have a new layer. You can always name this layer, such as drawing, or you don't have to. It's really up to you. And we're going to be using the pen tool. So remember, you watched the video about how to use the pen tool. Well, we're going to be using this to outline our image. And right here, you can set it to black outline. We want the fill to be none for right now, right? So fill is set to none. That's the one with the cross on it. And then stroke is black. So if it's set to anything else, you just reset it to default. And you just make sure the fill is selected and you click none. So now we're ready to actually get started. So you can leave everything else the same because you'll be switching the fill later, okay? So now we're gonna start tracing our subject to create an outline of the shape and the inner shapes. Make sure that when you're doing this, you're actually closing the shape that you're working with. And by closing it, I mean you get to the end, right, and a little circle appears, and then you've closed that object. It's very important that you do that. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be using the pen tool, and what I recommend is that if you're not very good with the pen tool, you just make some actual points around your image, and then you go back later in and you actually edit it to be more exact. So you can decide, you know, if you want it to go around this way or around the wheels. It's kind of up to you. So this is one way you can do it, and then use the add anchor, delete anchor, convert anchor point to actually change your image. And you can change this way and like select an anchor and change this way, and then use the direct selection tool to like move points around and change the handles. It's up to you. I like to try to get it sort of more accurate on the first go around. So what I most likely would do is I would have my pen tool and I'd click and start making my edits going around. Remember, you click back on the anchor point to reset it. Make my curve, click to reset it. Make my point, make my curve, click to reset it, and I would go through like that. So again, this is going to help you get the mastery of the pen tool. Okay, now once you've done that, you'll have an outline of your image. You're also going to want to make a outline of any of the inner shapes that you're going to want to subtract. Because remember, it looks really nice when there's some negative space as well. So if you have a building or something like that, think about what negative spaces you can also have within your silhouette. So you've done all the outlining of your image and any of the inner shapes. The next thing you're going to be doing is you're going to take your object and you're going to switch it. And you take your object and you're going to switch it, right? And then you're going to select both of these and you're going to window and make sure the Pathfinder is open. So here's the Pathfinder, it's right over here. Now since I did the outline first and then I did the object that I want to be taken away, I'm going to go to the shape mode and I'm going to click minus front, right? That only works if the object that you want deleted is in front of the other object. So say, for example, I didn't do this object first. What I'd want to do is select it, and you can right click, arrange, bring to front, right? So if you don't do it in the correct order, you did maybe the outline of the part you want selected first, like the part you want deleted first, well then you know you can just change the order of your shapes. So again, minus front. And now you have the actual outline of your image, okay? Now you're ready to actually add your typography. So here you can see, this is my quote. You add it in, you change the font to be whatever the font is that you chose. Most likely you've picked a new font. You make it kind of around the same size you want it to be. Remember, it's going to be fitting in to the actual profile of your image. All right. The next thing you're going to be doing and the next thing that you're going to be doing, and now you need to pay the next thing you need to be doing, and you need to pay careful attention to this, is you're going to right click on this text and click Create Outlines. Now we're making this no longer actual text that we can edit with the text tool, but we're going to be making it text that we can actually manipulate. So remember, when you're actually making the text, you click the type tool and you type out what you need to type, and you change, the font, and you change the size. But now we've created outlines. All right. We're going to then right click again, ungroup these letters. So now they're all separate. The very next step is we're going to actually group the specific words. So now Command G group, Command G group. You can just drag and select. You want to group these actual words. Now you'll notice here that I have a different layer for my outline and a different layer for my text. And this is important because you're going to want to be able to lock your outline when you're working on manipulating your text. So now I've grouped all of my words together and you're ready to start moving them. The next step you're going to want to do is you want to just select these different words, right? And you're going to want to give it a random fill because you're going to want to be able to actually look at what you're doing when you are putting it over your image. Now later on you can change the color of your profile, like of my car. If you're using something else, you can change that color and you can be able to choose a background color as well. But for now, work in black and change this to something that you'll be able to see very well over the black. So like a yellow or a green or something like that, so that you can actually see it when you bring it over your car or whatever it is you're using. So now you'll see here, I have actually put the words into my car and I'm ready to start manipulating it. Now, you select your first word, and my first word is I, and you go to Object, Envelope Distort, so Envelope Distort, right? Make with Mesh, all right? Very important, you're gonna reduce the number of rows to 1, and you're gonna change the columns. Now, for any time that you have a word that's more than 2 letters, like live, that would be 4 columns. Any word that's 2 letters or less is always going to be 2 columns because you need to be able to manipulate it, okay? So now I'm going to zoom in so I can actually show you what I'm doing. And this is where you're going to use the direct selection tool, and you're going to start actually grabbing the handles and each point of the mesh to fit your outline, okay? Make sure you leave a little bit of a space between the word and the end of your silhouette, all right? Because you want it to have a little bit of like sort of wiggle room, because this will end up being cut out, all right? So that's the example of using I. Now you go to live, same thing. All right, Object, Envelope Distort, Make with Mesh. And now I have 4 letters, so I'm going to have 1 row and 4 columns. Now while you're working, you can be moving things around, changing the size a little bit, making some of them a little bit bigger, some of them a little bit smaller, and generally playing around with getting your quote to fit into this specific space. And generally getting your quote to fit into this specific space. This is where your artistic creativity can come in, all right? So how you do this is up to you. Use your eye, play around, and see what works. All right, so you're using the direct selection tool to move each point of the mesh to fit your outline. Make sure you leave a gap, all right? And there's also one other thing you can do is you can use these handle points to actually change the shape to make a little bit curve around the points that you're setting. So there are different things you can do. You're going to move from word to word, and then once you're actually done, you can see here, I've actually finished putting all my letters in. You're going to select all the words, and again, this is why you want to lock that outline. You've locked your source image. You select all of these words, so you can just drag and select all of these words. And then you're going to go to Object, and you're going to go to Expand. So Object, Expand. All right? So this is going to permanently apply this envelope distortion. All right? So Object, Expand, click OK. Then you're going to go to Object, Compound Path, Make. Very important you follow these specific instructions, all right? Now you're going to make sure your outline is unlocked so you can select it, and you're going to select all of the words and the outline, all right? And you're going to use the Pathfinder again, and you're going to delete the words and allow the image to show through. So again, we're going to use the minus front, and now you'll see that they're actually like cutouts from your silhouette. You're going to then make sure that you have any sort of separate objects. If this is one complete object, but if you have more than one, you're going to actually group it, where you go Command G and you're going to group it all together. So if you have separate elements, you're going to group it. Mine is all one, so I don't really need to worry about that. And then you're going to go to Effect. So you didn't realize this, but Illustrator has effects just like Adobe Photoshop. Effect, Distort and Transform, Roughen. So we're going to try to simulate the irregularities of hand-drawn art. So we're going to check absolute and smooth options. Absolute and smooth. And you can play around with this a little bit, but what I prefer to do is about 0.5, so very slight, and around 20. And you can preview what this looks like. You can play around with it a little bit more. Don't have to do exactly as I do it. You can click OK. Now you can actually add texture to your work. So this is when you're going to actually open up the grunge background Illustrator file. And here you'll see you have a bunch of different textures. And these are for you to actually use in your project. So when you select one of these, you copy it, you bring it into your illustration. So this is not my illustration. This is my illustration. You paste it in. But how do you actually apply this to your image? Very easily. You have your object. This is the pattern that you're going to be actually making. You can make it small, a little bit smaller. You can keep it big. All right, you're going to go to Object, Pattern, Make. And then you'll notice that it shows up right here. Now, I see my pattern, and it's a little too small for the square that it put it in. So I'm going to make sure size tile to the artwork, and now it fits nicely. Make sure I save, or I'm done with that. You can also always go into double click this pattern you have right here, and you can edit it. And you can make it smaller or bigger, and you make a change, move it around or whatever, and then you click done when you're done. Now you don't need this anymore. You can delete it. You select your object. You add a new fill on top of the color, and you put in your pattern. Now you're like, oh, I can't really see it. Well, that's when you make sure that first of all, you've added it to the right object. And then you can go into right here, click opacity, and you can change the blend mode just like in Photoshop. So you can play with the different blend modes, right? And you can see what works. But you can also change the color of the fill. So this is where you can have some opportunity to change the color of your fill, change the blend mode of your overlay, your pattern. You know, you can play around and see what that looks. Now there's one last step. Well, first of all, you should be saving this as you go. Remember, Command S and save it. But your last step, and you'll notice here, is that I have a background. And that's super easy. All you need to do for the background is I like to make a new layer on the bottom and title it Background. And then you're going to draw in the background here. And again, this is where you have the opportunity to have different colors and shapes and all sorts of stuff. And you're going to hide this layer. And now you can also add a pattern to the background. You can always look through the library and look through the different patterns that they have here. You can use another one of these that you have in the grunge background, like say for example this one. I would copy it, go into my file, paste it, object, pattern, make, go in and actually size tile to art, click done. You no longer need this, so I delete it. I then select my object, and then I create a new fill, and that's when I can add that there. And then you want to change maybe the opacity, and you want to change the blend mode, and bada bing, bada boom, I'm done. So now you don't have to change colors. This is just options. You don't have to add patterns. Again, this is just options. You want to be saving this as you go. And then when you're finally done, you do File, Export, make sure format is JPEG, and you click Export. And then you click OK. And then you're going to be taking this JPEG file and you're going to be uploading it to your folder on Google Drive. Now I encourage you to play around with these tools, with all the different options, but you need to follow these basic steps and then see where they take you.